and welcome back to the channel of Motorbike Nonsense. This is the new Ducati Diavel V4 and I'm here to tell you it's one of the most shocking bikes I've ridden in the past probably 5 years. It is not what you think it is, so stay tuned to find out what it's like to ride quickly on a sunny British B road, and I'm going to show you what's new about it as well. So stay tuned, keep watching, because I'm about to giggle and swear quite a bit. Let's go. The Ducati Diavel V4 is a £23,595 motorbike. It is expensive. You can pay a bit more, I think, to have it in thrilling black, but it's not as thrilling as the red, frankly. I would have it in red. It's a power cruiser. Really, it now feels like a super naked. We'll get onto that in the riding bit. Apologies for any wind noise. It's just quite windy. In terms of looks, it's got an all-new headlight with C-shaped daytime running lights. It's got massive nostrils, like someone that's been doing too much of the older Colombian marching powder. It is very long in the wheelbase still. It looks like it shouldn't go around corners, but as we'll find out again in a minute, it really, really does. It's got new clocks. It is all new. Like a rubbish garden centre, there's no trellis anymore. That has gone, been consigned to the bin. It's completely new. I've got to show you the back because there's something that might trigger you if you're tripophobic. Look how wide that is. It's got a 240 section rear tyre. It's Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3, and yeah, you can't feel that width when you're riding it. It's phenomenal. These tail lights, they're a bit weird. They kind of, you view them through this mesh. It looks a bit like an alien's face from Star Wars, or one of those weird plants that eats rabbits. It's got it's got 4 exhaust exits to tell you that this now has a V4 engine, not a V-twin. I'm not so sure about that. To me, that looks a little bit like one of those aftermarket minigun exhausts from the bad bits of the early noughties when everyone had anodized blue bolts on their Hayabusas. And it also draws your attention to the massive collector box. Now, this isn't actually a very loud bike. Obviously, it's Euro 5 compliant, so you might want to junk that for one of the incredibly expensive aftermarket options from Ducati, which range from about, I think, 2 grand up to 4, 5 grand for a full system. It is ridiculous. You've got a conventionally placed shock here, and yeah, it's very, very Diavel. Look at that. Like previous Diavels, the pillion pegs are designed to really blend into the design and fold out. And there's a touring pack for this bike which adds things like a pillion backrest, heated grips, panniers, and a little smoked screen as well. There's also an option to have some very cool machined looking rims as well. So you can properly tart this bike up, but to be honest, in standard form, it's so good to ride. I would save my money, not for track days, but for tearing up the streets of Europe. I'm just going to talk about the engine briefly and some of the electronics, and then we will go and ride it. Now, as you probably know if you're watching this, the Diavel has moved to V4 power. It uses the 1158cc V4 Gran Turismo engine from the V4 Multistrada, and very good it is too. It's 168 horsepower, which is up 6 horsepower on the V-twin, and it's 126 newton meters of torque, which is ever so slightly down. It can shut off its rear bank of cylinders under, I think, 4,000 RPM on the move to save fuel economy by something like 6%. Now, it drinks from a 20-litre tank, and the fuel economy is not going to be great, but I think you'll probably get about 160, 170 miles to a tank on this. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's got really long valve service intervals as well. 36,000 miles between valve services. It's ridiculous. Or every 2 years for a service. It's basically a bargain. It's not a bargain. It's really expensive. How's this for a weird angle to talk about the electronics on the Diavel V4? Very briefly, it's got lean sensitive traction control and ABS. It's got 4 rider modes, which are urban, wet, sport and touring. Just leave it in sport unless it's raining. You get 115 horsepower in urban and wet. And it's got a reasonably diddy screen, but it's quite clear to read. And the switchgear is illuminated around the edges. You can tell that I just want to go and ride this, which we're going to do once I've detached my beard from the fuel tank. I might just start licking it because I really want one. Right, you joined me on one of my favourite country roads in the whole of the UK. I've only got the bike for a few hours. I haven't really got time to mess about. So sport mode and let's go! I can't get my words out. This thing. Okay. We're talking. That was a teensy little wheelie off a crest on a bike with a wheelbase the same as a transit van and a rear tyre the same width as your mum. It is not a cruiser. It is just not a cruiser. This bike, I've literally ridden it for 15 minutes. It is a missile. It is stupendously fast. I think you probably saw that one coming. What you probably didn't see coming is the fact that this goes down this road with a fluidity and a sense of purpose and direction and confidence I don't get on my adventure bike, on my KTM 1290 Super Adventure S. This goes down this road like a flippin' Super Duke. It is the way that, look, come up to a corner, don't even think about it, drop an elbow, turn in, headbutt the pigeon like that MotoGP race years ago, and just absolutely gas the Jesus out of it. This is this is a super naked. I'm sorry, I think this outhandles a couple of naked bikes. This is sorry, collect my thoughts. Right, the way it turns in really quickly. You expect it to roll in languidly like a beached whale being rolled back into the ocean. It doesn't. It turns in with a crispness and a sharpness of the best super nakeds. How has Ducati done this? That was the road I wanted to go down. How has Ducati done that? It's got tyres so wide, yet look, you barely have to put any pressure on the bars and it's there. It's on its side and it feels good on its side. Oh, that throttle connection. The fueling is really good. Look, 30 limit. I'm doing 24 miles an hour in third gear. It pulls really crisply, really cleanly. Let's see if we can do fourth gear at 25 miles an hour. 23 miles an hour. A little bit chucky, but it pulls smoothly to 30. That makes this a commuter. Yeah. Big power cruiser commuter, not a cruiser. I'm calling it a hyper naked because I think it is. Well, certainly, oh my goodness, I don't know what it is. It's a force of frickin' nature. Now, the old Diavel, as I've mentioned, used to hammer my spine in quite an unpleasant way. This one, you still feel the bumps in the road through your bum, but it's not as unpleasant. It feels like there's a bit more compliancy under the seat of this bike, and that really just makes it feel a lot plusher. I was a bit skeptical when Ducati launched this bike on dead smooth roads in the Middle East, and I thought, they've done that to mask something. I don't think they have. This isn't exactly the bumpiest road in the world, but it is indicative of most UK B roads, and it's not uncomfortable. It's really not. Okay, I'll try to say some more things about this bike. The brakes are instant bite, loads of power, which you need because this thing bloody rips. It is it is so smooth, the power. It is so smooth. It feels like you're on a proper big capacity multi-cylinder bike, which I guess you are. But look at this. It's just, I'm not worried about decking it out. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm sure it will sooner than a proper hyper naked. At my pace, I'm not worried about decking it out. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm not thinking about riding it differently to any other upright bike. And the previous Diavel 1260S that I rode a couple of years back, that did make me ride it slightly differently. I was always conscious that the foot pegs were a bit lower, that had a wide tyre. It did a pretty good job of disguising it. This is really on another level, and you do really feel the weight loss compared to the previous bike. This just feels like a totally different bike. It feels like it's got some of the same DNA. Maybe it's the old Ducati's sexy aunt or something like that. Just goes to tennis club every weekend and works out. It just feels much more athletic. Oh man, these are my first impressions, and as I said, I've only got this for a few hours, but first impressions count for a lot. And on a dry, sunny day like today, I've already fallen in love with this bike. That's dangerous, isn't it? I'll get a bit more critical as I go on, but I'm only in sport mode as well. I've not tried touring a bike like this. You're not going to take it out on wet days, are you? Maybe you will, I don't know. Around there, a little bit lumpy low down. That V4 has its weird firing order that makes it feel like a V-twin, but you soon get through that. It's just so tractable. My only worry is I just lose my license on this. I know it's a naked, and as soon as you get to like 80 miles an hour, it's a bit uncomfy, but you get there so quickly. And because it's got a long wheelbase, I, Mr. Not That Much Skill, have the confidence to go full send in second gear. Look, let's come up, let's do a little test, shall we? I'm gonna go in first. I've got it. Right, full throttle first gear. No, brain can't comprehend how fast that made me go. It sounds good as well. I don't think Ducati's V4 will ever sound quite as interesting as the Aprilia one due to the firing order, but it's got its own snarl, and the way the noise changes as you go through the rev range is really urgent. Why am I trying to do power wheelies off crests? I'm on a Diavel. I think perhaps my impressions of this have been a little bit tainted by seeing some of the journalists actually doing stand-up wheelies on these on the launch. I never thought Diavel would be able to wheelie or lift the front. This feels incredibly playful compared to the first one. This bike just wants to play. Oh man, this is a very hard bike to justify buying if you look at the spec sheet, because it's very expensive and it looks very focused, like it can do one thing well, which is cruising along Muscle Beach in America saying, hey, look at me and my aviators and my weird helmet that may or may not hark back to the German regime of the 1930s. This isn't for those sorts of riders. This is for people who want to go f***ing nuts on a motorbike. Ah! That seat stop, the pillion seat stop, is very much needed, because this generates an awful lot of forward momentum. Fucking hell. It feels so good around these corners. It's got so much corner exit grip. It's, oh, I don't know what to make of this. This is bananas. It is bananas. Right, let's find some criticism. Mirrors. They're big, they're clear, they're easy to adjust. Oh, that's not criticism, that's another good thing. No wind protection. It's a naked bike, we're not expecting wind protection, are we? It's got backside illuminated switchgear. The screen is a little bit smaller than some other Ducatis, but it's really easy to use. It's packed with features, and it's super clear. It is quite low, it's out of your eye line, so you can't really see your speed, which is a little bit dangerous, I would posit. There's no little second screen anymore. Feels a lot more modern for not having that, to be honest. It's keyless apart from your fuel tank. You've got to put the key in that. It's got a start-stop button. Yeah, that bump was a bit sharp on the old backside, but it was way better than the old bike. Admittedly, the only other Diavel I've ridden was the old 1260S, which had Erlin suspension. There's not an S model yet. I reckon it's probably on the way. It'll be even more expensive. That'll be 27 grand or something, I would have thought. This feels like an absolute... It doesn't feel like a thug. It doesn't feel like a thug. It used to feel like a thug. This feels like a ballet dancer with brass knuckles, because it feels so lithe and it just wants to punch you around the face and then sit on your lap and tell you good stories. Yes, this bike handles very well. It goes very, very well. It stops brilliantly. It's blown my mind. It has actually blown my mind. It's the fact that I wasn't expecting the front wheel to start lifting and for it to feel like a more like I'd expect the Street Fighter to feel, but the Street Fighter doesn't feel like that, the V4 one. It feels very race bikey. I think this is more fun than a Street Fighter V4. Dodgy ground. I'm on dodgy ground, I know, but it is a cool thing. It's just really chuffing expensive. The quick shifter and blipper, as with all Ducatis that use this V4 Stradale, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called. Gran Turismo engine. It's super slick, super smooth. It's got nice induction bark. The chassis is just unflappable over these bumps. I've ridden firm and naked bikes that just get put off by some of this mild rutting. Never be put off by mild rutting. Just power into the corners, and it can carry corner speed as well. The anti-wheelie kicky, and then oh dear, what a machine, what a machine. I fucking love it. I should point out that you can switch the fuel readout to be a range readout rather than just bars. Showing I've got 275 miles. This tank pretty sure that is a lie. In terms of fuel economy, this press bike's probably had a hard life and it's showing 35 mpg. Not sure that gives me the range of 275 miles it says I have, but hey, whatever. Now, one thing I haven't spoken about is the controls. The foot controls are kind of slightly forward. They're not proper foot forward controls, but they're not... It feels natural, but they're sort of not where you expect them. If I was going to criticise one thing about this engine, it's that you do hit the rev limiter sooner than you might think. It revs to 11,000 RPM, but at that point you're pretty high on life, I think it is fair to say. And you just want it to keep going, and you don't want the fun to stop, frankly. If you go and blag one test ride this year from a dealer, even if you've got no intention of buying it, make it a Diavel V4, because you just won't understand until you ride one how much you need to recalibrate your brain. It's the handling more than the speed, to be honest. It's the brakes, it's the... oh, it comes together as such a brilliant package. I'm going to stop doing my high-pitched voice because that'll make serious bearded internet men think I'm just giddy about this bike, but it works so much better in the UK than I thought it would. The back brake works. I haven't taken the pegs out, probably not trying hard enough. Very briefly, one thing I haven't mentioned while riding this is how well I fit on it. I'm 6'3" and I've got room for my knees. I don't feel hunched up on it, I don't feel bunched up on it, I don't feel crunched up on it, I don't feel like any of those things that rhyme. The reach to the bars is not stupid, but there is one. And you can lean into it and you can get your elbows out and motocross it. And the pegs aren't too high, aren't too low. I've been trying to deck them out, I just can't. That probably says more about my talent than the bike, to be honest. It's comfortable. It is comfortable. Apart from at 70, 80 miles an hour, you're just a big windsock, but you knew that, didn't you? I should have gone up there. So yeah, it's good. Firstly, apologies for the slightly giddy nature of this video. I've not had a huge amount of time with this bike, but in that very short time, it has wormed its way into my life like a beautiful tapeworm. Who's it for? Is it still just a rich person's plaything? Unfortunately, the price means it sort of is £24,000, but if you can afford one, you're getting a bike that's actually got a lot more bandwidth of entertainment than you might expect. It is more comfy than before, thanks to 15mm more rear wheel travel, and it just doesn't pound my ring like the old one used to over bumps. It is a much more comfortable bike. It feels like a totally different bike to the previous Diavel to me. The weight loss is really evident. The way it tips into corners, it feels like a naked bike. And the power is obviously ferocious. It hooks up with the grip from that massive 240 section rear tyre and just frankly F's right off over there somewhere and keeps going. But while it's doing that, the front wheel is kind of hopping off crests and you can clutch it up if you want to a little bit. It's a really playful thing. Don't look at this and think it's a drag strip queen. It is far from it. Now, I'm still not sure I'd be comfortable on a long distance. I haven't lived with this long enough to be able to find that out. But part of me does want to get the panniers and the touring pack and bugger off around Europe on this because it's just very different. You'll be able to absolutely humiliate some of your sports bike riding friends on this bike. In the corners, on the straights, everywhere. You'll be more comfortable, you'll feel more special. The riding position, there's something very cool about the riding position on this bike. And if it sounds like I'm gushing, I don't think it's because I've just been blown away by it. I think Ducati's just done a really good job of making the Diavel a much more rounded prospect and more entertaining at the same time. So yes, if you can afford one of these, it could almost be your only bike. But I think it's probably quite likely to be a second or third bike, but whatever. It is a magnificent thing, and I really can't wait to turn you off, sorry, like all my ex-girlfriends, and just go and bugger off down the road and have some more fun on it. But anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. Please hit like if this video has been helpful or entertaining or both. Do subscribe to the channel because I've got plenty more bike reviews coming very soon, perhaps none of which will make me laugh quite like this one. I'll see you next time. Skoda Yeti, excellent choice. I'll probably have a Diavel V4 though.